hard work.
I'm sorry, but I forgot that we need to record this session.
Okay, I clicked the button.
Yeah,
Thank you.
everyone had to click the button. So it's a recorded session because we have a channel, and it will be on our channel. Sorry, Professor.
Okay. Okay, very good. The wrongdoer has to accept responsibility in restorative justice for what they've done, whether it's a criminal defendant or a tortfeasor or a municipality or government. Accepting responsibility. Normally, at least in the American criminal justice system, you have an adversarial system. The defendant is convicted, the defendant is resentful, the defendant is sent to a prison, but the defendant never accepts responsibility for what they've done. And restorative justice requires that acceptance of responsibility. Thus, it also focuses on those who have been victimized by the antisocial conduct. It repairs the harm that is done. And again, in the American criminal justice system, the focus is on punishing the defendant. It's not on trying to restore the victim or the person who suffered the harm to a position where they would be if the harm hadn't been inflicted. Now, often once somebody is harmed, they may not be made fully whole. But restorative justice focuses then both on the perpetrator who did the harm, makes them accept responsibility, makes them attempt to repair the harm, focuses on the victim to see that their needs are taken care of. And all of that is to build a community. And that is often another element that is missing. The state comes in, it punishes somebody, but the community doesn't benefit necessarily directly from that. So in many ways, the community environment contributes to the harm. So having the community present, seeing how the community may have contributed to the antisocial behavior, how the community can be mended by a restorative justice is an important part of it. And all of that is to build a better future by helping the people who've done harm, by helping the people who have been harmed, and by working on the community as a whole. So that, I think, is an important element for law students, for almost any student in a university in public health and sociology and economics, in the medical area, psychology, to look at that point of view and try to implement it. So we have the law students take a 2-hour class where we have people come in and speak, law enforcement officers, judges, people who have been victimized by crime, people who have committed crimes and spent time in prison. We have psychologists, sociologists come in and talk to the law students about how they can implement restorative justice in their lives and their practices when they finish. We also have the law students go out into the community. And Chicago is a very segregated city. Areas of the city are totally African-American, totally Black, totally Hispanic, Latino, and many different ethnic groups and things live in Chicago, but often in their own separate communities. So we also have great poverty and great wealth in Chicago, and communities that are very wealthy, some communities that are very, very poor. So we make the students go into the poorer, segregated communities, work with children. We have boys and girls clubs that where the children go after school, if their parents are working, if they're not, if it's not safe to go home in some cases, and our law students work with those students. And young children get restorative justice. The big question all children ask, I think, is, well, it isn't fair. Why do I have to do this? It isn't fair. And children accept rules and all of that. So restorative justice involves the children in setting up their rules and setting up the procedures used to solve problems. And it really works from the bottom up, not from the top down. So we're not imposing judgment down on people. We're having sessions where we work with people, people recognize that they've done wrong, and then discuss ways in which they may repair that harm. So restorative justice is generally accomplished through chats, through peer jurors, juries, through peace circles, where people sit around in a circle, and that's normally the way that we use it. Or it may be simply by having panels and hearings and that type of thing, where people may present what has happened to them, and solutions are worked out. The process is not easy, but the results are good. When we work with the children in the Boys and Girls Club, particularly students who have behavioral problems, truancy problems from school, we see a big difference in the children that we work with. We started working with children because we were going to work with people in the Cook County Jail. We were going to work with newly released adults from a prison. But as we got into it, we started to feel that we needed to work with high school students, secondary level students, and then finally with primary students to get them right at the beginning of their educations, to get them into a different mode of thinking on how to solve problems. And it's also good for our students here at the law school. Most students go into law, as they do most professions, with a lot of idealism. And by the time they finish their graduate studies, they're pretty cynical and have kind of lost a lot of the reason why they decided to go into law or any other profession. And I think restorative justice makes them see the purpose of what they're doing. Helps them see that they can be problem solvers. They can be peacekeepers and mediators, and really make a difference in people's lives. We know that in studies have been done, and you probably know it better than I, of the effects of trauma, childhood trauma, adult trauma is tremendous, and we try to address that. Our law students are not trained as psychologists, so if there are people where that type of help is needed, we refer them. And we're recently starting a project with the public health school here at the university, with the Department of Psychiatry and Medical School, to bring a holistic approach here to the things that we are doing. So all of this has been affected, I think, recently by the pandemic. We started 12 years ago, but then we virtually, like everything else, had to shut down for 2 years, and we did a lot of training on Zoom. The pandemic really affected, I think, students, particularly young people, and that's something that we've been working on. Racism and segregation is big in Chicago. It's something that, unfortunately, in the United States has been with us from the beginning. We had a history of slavery, After slavery, we had a history of segregation, and the effects of that are still with us. So in Chicago, we have segregated housing patterns, and once those are established, even with government policies and everything, they're very difficult to overcome. Those segregated patterns affect schools, they affect employment, they affect transportation, they affect medical care, they affect virtually everything in the life of Chicago. And recently, I think everybody all over the world knows, the United States has been experiencing a big epidemic of gun violence. And this particularly is affecting children and young people who can't go out after dark because they may be shot randomly, even though they are not the topic. Every student that we know and that we've counseled in the Chicago public schools, either someone in their family, a friend of theirs, or somebody they know has been the victim of gun violence. And these are children 10 years old, 8 years old, 12 years old, and they're living with this on a day-to-day basis. So they're suffering real trauma. And so sitting down with law students, talking about these issues, for the first time, students are able to express their fears, their emotions, and try to work out solutions, how they can continue to go to school, exist in the neighborhood, is really an important element of what we're trying to do here in Chicago. The problem also in Chicago, as around the world, we are faced with a new influx of immigrants. Many of them are victims of violence and war around the world. Many of them are victims of poverty, climate change, but we're seeing, and it's well known across the Mexican border, thousands and thousands of immigrants entering the United States every day. Many of those are ending up in Chicago. Those are producing problems in the schools and in the neighborhoods and things like that. So again, working on those problems to identify what the problems are, educate people about it, and work out solutions, not at the highest level at the mayor's office or something, but right down in the local neighborhoods and communities where people come from, is what we're doing in these situations. As I said, our major focus here, and there's a number of different ways to do restorative justice, but we use the restorative circle, often called the peace circle, where you get 10 or 12 people, you sit around in a circle. Beforehand, people agree on sort of what rules they will follow. Generally, everybody agrees to respect everybody's opinion and to listen. And we have a talking piece. People go around the circle where we talk about a problem. People express their views about the problem, and then we try to come up with a solution. And in many ways, that's a wonderful a process. It produces results that one would never expect. One person sitting alone trying to work out a problem rarely sees all the angles and that you get in the circle process. In the circle process, everybody is equal, and no one can talk when another person is talking. That's the purpose of the talking piece. You send a object around the circle, generally past right or to the left, either way, and only that person can talk. So it forces everybody else to listen, which most of us don't do very well. And it gives people an opportunity who may be too shy or unwilling to speak to express their views and they're listened to with respect. What is said in a circle is confidential. So people can admit to things, talk about things, and all of those types of things. The Illinois law that I mentioned to you provided that confidentiality. So if you're legitimately participating in a circle in Illinois, and you say something incriminating about something that you've done illegally or something, the prosecutor cannot use that statement against you in court or any place else. What's said in the circle is confidential. You could still be prosecuted for the crime. You could still be convicted on other evidence. But again, what you say, what you do in a circle is confidential now in Illinois, and that's being studied in other states. And I'm informed by judges and others, prosecutors who work in this area, that it's working very well. Before then, it was mainly defense attorneys who were reluctant to have their clients participate in a restorative justice process. This confidentiality rule, this privilege that the Illinois legislature established is doing a very good job. I would say, and I think the question was asked, circles require a lot of preparation. Now, you don't put somebody in a circle blindly. Generally, they have to be ready to enter a circle. So often it is not expedient to put both the person who committed the antisocial conduct and the recipient of that antisocial conduct in a circle together at the beginning. Its tensions are too high. They're likely to explode, and things would get worse. So again, we work on that. We work on the people. And then when it's right, then we sit down in a circle and try to work things out. But it's a long process. It's not something that you do in one session. Sometimes it takes 6 months. Sometimes it takes years. And in fact, we had a speaker in our class this past week whose sister had been murdered now about 30 years ago, and brutally murdered by a teenage boy. And he was ultimately found, he was convicted, he was sentenced to life in the penitentiary. And she decided she would not hate him, and she would forgive him, but then be done with him. And then she thought about it, and she thought, well, I can't. What good is just saying to in my own mind, I forgive him? I'm going to write him a letter and tell him I forgive him. And so finally, she wrote him a letter and told him she forgave him. He wrote her about a 12-page letter back, and the two of them have now visited in prison, are corresponding, and she says she finally kind of feels at peace. He feels at peace, and so again, that restorative justice process can be accomplished in many different ways, but it isn't instantaneous, and I don't think we should necessarily expect miracles from the process. But the circle process is effective when it's used. It isn't always effective, but it is more often than not. It brings people together, brings people from the community together who often have insights for everybody as to how these types of problems can be done. Our current system, at least in the United States, of criminal punishment is just the opposite of what it should be. People get punished, they get sent to prison. Once they get out of prison, they can't get jobs, they cannot get housing. They're really shunned by society, which forces them in many ways or provides the opportunity for them to commit more crimes. The restorative justice process, where they make peace with the community. We have restorative justice proceedings in the federal courts in the United States, in the state courts, where the judges, the prosecutors, defense attorneys, probation officers, social workers sit down with offenders and work out a plan after they've gotten out of prison for them to get employed, for them to get housing. Really is effective. One other thing that I'd want to mention briefly before I go on to another topic, and that is the question of secondary trauma. Everybody, lawyers, social workers, doctors, psychiatrists, ministers, religious people, anybody who works with people suffers secondary trauma. And we address that in our class also. One of the things that we work with law students on is how to take care of yourselves. And I think that's an important lesson for everybody, that we can't do justice if we ourselves are not feeling good, if we're run down. And so we spend a lot of time teaching things like meditation, therapy, exercise, all the things that sort of help people relax and get out of themselves. So that's kind of my little introduction to restorative justice, what it is, and how we're working on it at the law school. I would like to address another matter, and that's the question of truth, because I don't think you can do restorative justice without facing the truth. And that is a very, very important element of restorative justice, and very controversial, at least in the United States now, and I think throughout the world. But before I start that, any questions or anything that any of you have that would that maybe wasn't clear from my remarks?
Sorry, Professor, can you hear me?
Yes.
So, and I was about to type in the group session, but since you have given the room for someone to ask questions, my major take is that I like the fact that you have been able to adopt a kind of bottom-up approach in addressing these issues. So my major concern is concerning the issue of illegal arms in the Chicago state. What is the role of the government in trying to curb this menace? Because I see that it's very, very rampant in that state. So because what you have been saying since morning now concerning these issues geared towards and engaging the community, going to the rural environment to talk to the people, to address the issues from the community's perspective. So now my question is, what is the government of the Chicago state, their role in trying to address this issue? Because I think there is a need to curb illegal arms in Chicago state. If I'm not mistaken, what I'm trying to say is that there is a need to actually reduce the way people are carrying guns up and down in the state. So what is the government doing as regarding that? That's just basically my question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I really welcome it, because one of the things that we face in Chicago, and particularly in going into certain neighborhoods in Chicago, is the question of violence. And too many people have guns. and there's shootings, and often the victims of those shootings are innocent people, and particularly children. Many of our young people every day are being killed or shot, seriously injured in Chicago and around the United States in gun violence. That is a problem that we're working on, and it's a very complicated one, unfortunately, in the United States, largely because of our Supreme Court. About 10 or 15 years ago, the Supreme Court interpreted our Constitution to give everybody a right to carry a gun, and under the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, which had formerly been read to allow states to have militias, armed militias, in order to keep peace. But the Supreme Court extended that to an individual right of each individual to self-defense by having a gun. And that is still being worked out in the United States. So you have almost two equal groups of people in the United States: those who favor gun control and limitations on what kind of weapons people should be allowed to have, if any, and under what circumstances they can use them. And then you've got others who argue that any infringement on the right to bear arms is illegal. Chicago had, for many years, had a gun ordinance that forbade the carrying of concealed weapons, that strictly restricted licensed people to carry arms and things like that. Some of those are under attack in the courts. In fact, the original Chicago ordinance was declared unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court. So we're working that out politically. Just on the radio this morning, there was a major massacre in Maine, and one of the federal representatives from Maine, who had formerly rejected any kind of gun legislation, now came out in favor of it. So it's a very hot topic. Most of us in the law school community and everything are working on it, trying to educate people about it. I myself think that the United States Supreme Court went the wrong way in establishing that there was some sort of a personal liberty in carrying a firearm. But, that's the current state of the law in the United States. So it's very disturbing, and it's very disturbing for our young people to be in these circumstances. I would say this, that for the most part, you hear about these shootings. Chicago is a big city, and for the most part, life goes on. People don't think about it every minute of the day. But it is a fact of life, and it's something that I think is becoming more and more a problem in the United States. And I think we have to address it from a legal standpoint. We have to address it from a sociological standpoint, from a public health, medical standpoint, from a number of different ways. So America's got a lot of problems, as we all know. One thing about America is it's got freedom of speech, and a lot of good people who are really interested in reaching a decent solution. So I'm optimistic that somehow we'll come up with the proper balance. But right now it looks pretty bleak. So thank you for your question. I don't know if I've answered, because I don't think there probably isn't a satisfactory answer to that question.
Thank you, Professor. I just want to emphasize, it's better that you keep on your lecture and we discuss in the 1 hour discussion, and students can ask the question. That there's like an hour for the discussion, or 30 minutes where they can keep their questions. So we prefer to hear from you more actually about the lecture.
Yeah, the other major thing that I wanted to raise is that question of truth and untruth. That you can't have restorative justice if people are not willing to be honest and tell the truth. And I think that's one of the major problems, not only in the United States, but in the world today, that people act from different sources of knowledge. What some people believe to be true is considered to be false by others. And so how do we do restorative justice when there is really no common consensus about what is true or what is false, what is valid, and what is invalid? And that is made particularly difficult in the United States, same way as regulating guns with the First Amendment. The First Amendment protects freedom of speech. It protects freedom of opinion, and therefore virtually any political opinion, social opinion, religious opinion, religious belief is lawful and cannot be restricted in the United States. On the other hand, and just using a recent example, the last presidential election, where factually it's clear that Joseph Biden was elected president of the United States, but former President Trump and his supporters keep saying that Trump was elected and that he really won the vote, and both sides cannot be right. Statistically, we know, studies have been done, investigations have been done. What Trump is saying is, for the most part, false. On the other hand, his supporters talk about fake news and attempts by the government and the news media to cover up the true facts. So how do you ever resolve those types of things where you've got two different contentions on what is true and what is false? And how do you square that with the American Constitution that provides for freedom of speech and normally does not recognize that? Now, one question that I think is important is, what is the purpose of freedom of speech? And the general theory of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And there's really two important aspects of freedom of speech in the United States. One is taking speech as a human right. It's an individual right. It's an individual liberty. It's connected with human dignity. People should have the right to express and believe what they want to believe, free from government interference. Secondly, is the theory that free speech is necessary for a democracy. You can't have a democracy if people can't express their opinions, can't express their views, and do so without fear of retaliation. And that's exemplified in some of the very earliest Supreme Court opinions on freedom of speech. where Justice Holmes in the early 20th century, when there was great fear after World War I about communism and anarchy and all of those types of things, and the government was trying to suppress certain unpopular views. Justice Holmes declared that the best test of truth is in the marketplace. You don't regulate, the government shouldn't regulate what is said. Let people express things and then let people choose what is true and what is not. So sort of taking a relativistic a view of a truth and saying everybody should be able to express their facts that they believe in, their opinions, and get it out there, and hopefully the right results will be achieved in the marketplace. But we know that can be very dangerous. Falsehoods can undermine democracy themselves, and falsehoods can really lead to instability. And so how do you deal with that? I would say that the courts in the United States, for the most part, continue to support that idea that people should be allowed to express their beliefs, their opinions, what they think, whether they, regardless of the facts, who they believe won the election, that type of thing, without a fear of punishment. I'm throwing this out because I can give you the American view, but again, I think people can question and debate whether maybe the United States goes too far here in regulating or in not regulating speech. But the theory in the United States is, we don't want the government telling us what to believe, what not to believe, that people should be able to figure that out for themselves. So back in the 1960s and 70s during the Vietnam War, when the government tried to prevent the New York Times from publishing stories about how the United States got involved in Vietnam, and sort of a history compiled actually and stolen from the Defense Department. The court said, the idea of the government going in, stopping publication, telling people what they should know or what they shouldn't know, was not consistent with the ideals of the American Constitution. In about that time, and still continuing, although it's been criticized, the Supreme Court has held that the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, limits defamation actions against newspapers. The New York Times, one of the leading papers in the United States, was sued for printing a false story or a false advertisement about a Southern police chief. And some of the facts were wrong. And the New York Times was sued for defamation and got $1 million verdict against them. And $1 million in the 1960s was much higher than it would be today with inflation. And so this was a major case that went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said that errors in publishing could not be the subject of a suit for defamation. Excuse me. That type of action would chill newspapers and make them fearful for what they published. So they set down the rule that newspapers could not be sued unless they published something with actual malice. In other words, they knew it was false and did it purposefully to injure somebody. Very difficult standard. Almost no lawsuit is successful under that type of standard. Now, the defamation was of a public official. When it comes to invading the privacy of private individuals, there's a different standard. But at least when you're talking about matters of public concern involving public officials, the Supreme Court said we would rather tolerate the possibility of lies or of untruths or errors than chill and make newspapers fearful that if they publish something that was erroneous, that they could be sued for millions of dollars of damages in those types of situations. Supreme Court also, in another very famous case, held that it violated the freedom of the press to require a newspaper to publish a article by a political candidate when they had published an article critical of that candidate. So there was sort of a under Florida law right to reply, that if a newspaper criticized a political candidate, that candidate had the right to place an article in the newspaper replying and arguing why the newspaper article was wrong. Court said that was violated the First Amendment. It was making a newspaper publish something that they didn't want to publish. So again, that very broad latitude for speech and comment and opinion in a United States law. Probably the furthest where that applies in the United States is in hate speech, where groups go out, make racist comments, make comments against gays and lesbians, or against different religious groups or national groups because of their national origin. The court has said that type of speech is protected by the First Amendment. So, if you want to go out and give a racist speech, argue that white people are superior to black people and should be, black people should not have equal rights, that's your right to do that under the Constitution. I know in most of the world that is not proper. Under UN conventions, anti-genocide provisions and things like that, governments in some ways, Germany, for instance, with their experience with Nazism, takes a very different view. If you're publishing pro-Nazi ideas or things like that, that would be illegal in Germany. In the United States, again, that idea of free speech is possible. The only area to date where falsehood is not allowed is in commercial speech, in advertisements where for products and that type of thing. There, the court will say that if the advertisement is false or misleading, then it can be prohibited. So there's that narrow category where you're dealing with commercial speech, advertising, promoting a product, that type of thing. There, you've got to be truthful. In the political area, in the socio-economic area, you don't have to be truthful. In a recent case by the Supreme Court where a man falsely represented that he was a Medal of Honor winner. He had been in the war and been decorated and was a hero. He was not, and he had never gotten a medal from the United States about his valor or anything. But he went around telling people that he had. He was prosecuted under a law making it a crime to lie about having received a military honor. Supreme Court held that law unconstitutional, said that nobody was really hurt by this lie. He wasn't selling anything. He wasn't doing anything, and his right of free speech applied in that situation. So I just simply raise those questions. One of the elements of restorative justice, obviously, is to be truthful. You can't solve problems if people are not accepting a truth and are building their position on lies. But again, how you square that with the at least the United States very strict position on freedom of speech in our Constitution, which I believe in. I do think that once the government starts telling people what they can say and what they can't say and what they can believe and what they can't believe, that's leads you down the road to totalitarianism. On the other hand, we do know from recent events in the United States that if you allow the publication of lies to continue, that can likewise cause all kinds of mischief and harm. One other problem is the First Amendment doesn't apply to the government. So the government can say pretty much whatever they want. And that raises the question about getting information from the government. And in the United States, the court has read our Constitution as saying that you have no specific constitutional right to information from the government. You have the Freedom of Information Act that allows you to request information from government agencies and things like that. But the Freedom of Information Act has all kinds of exceptions: national security, privacy concerns, all of those types of things that the government can rely on to deny people information. So again, how you square all of this with a democratic process is, I think, a challenge throughout. And so I think the freedom of speech is important to democracy. You can't have a democracy without it. On the other hand, an unbridled freedom of speech can undermine a democracy, as we're seeing throughout the world today. And how you square those things is difficult. I do think, again, the restorative justice process, where you sit everybody down in a circle, everybody has to confront everybody else, everybody has a chance to say their due and then work out a solution, is one way of solving these problems. One thing, I think our hour is almost up, but the note that I wanted to end on is I've been talking about restorative justice primarily in antisocial behavior, in civil, in criminal matters, sort of on the individual and community level. But keep in mind, the restorative justice as a philosophy and as a practice can be used much more broadly. And the primary example of that is the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where in the early 1990s, the apartheid in South Africa came to an end. And then the question arose, how do we deal with the crimes committed by both sides during the apartheid regime? And under President Mandela, under Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the South Africans came up with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that people would come in a community meeting, basically tell the truth about what happened, what crimes they had committed, and if they are truthful. They didn't necessarily have to be remorseful, but so long as they were truthful, did not withhold any information, they would be given amnesty. And it gave the community a chance to know what happened during those Black years of apartheid. And it answered many questions for people. It didn't solve everything. Certainly didn't solve the economic disparity that existed in South Africa. But in many ways, in terms of a prescription to the horrible human rights abuses that occurred during that regime, it gave everybody a chance to, both victim and offender, a chance to say what happened, say what they felt, and involve the community. So that, I think, is a model. Was used in Rwanda. It's been used in South America after severe human rights abuses. And I think in many ways, we're in a world today where we have war, we have racial tensions, we have national tensions, we have religious tensions, and using that type of model rather than going to war. I think we all know wars and violence only makes things worse, and rarely, if ever, I can't think of any situations where violence really solves the issue permanently. It's often just leads to more resentment. Using the type of commission that South Africa did, using the circle process where both perpetrators and victims sit down, again, after a lot of preparation, and talk about these things in the long run is good. One thing that my students always ask me, and I ask myself, is forgiveness necessary for restorative justice? I think we would all agree that under every religion, the highest form of is forgiving, forgiving the people who have done things against us. But that can be very, very difficult. And I don't think it should stand in the way of restorative justice. We can still have our resentments, we can still have our feelings that injustice has been done while participating in the restorative justice. But I would say that as a ideal, as a goal, forgiveness is good. We all know from a psychological standpoint that you're never really at peace until you sort of give up your hatreds and make peace with your enemy. And that's a hard thing to do. And we shouldn't wait around for that to happen. There's ways that we can operate through restorative justice short of that, that will alleviate tensions, will alleviate harms, in where we can produce maybe a more just and hopefully peaceful community. Whether we're talking about a school, whether we're talking about a neighborhood, whether we're talking about a city or a nation, or the international community itself. So that's just sort of my general thoughts on restorative justice. It's very general. I apologize to you for sort of rambling on, and maybe I'm a bit of an idealist. I think after 80 years of living, I still have a idealistic streak in me, but I think I'm also very much of a realist. I've taught pretty much all over the world and experienced enough, particularly in the American Civil Rights Movement, to know that things are not always perfect, and no matter how hard you work, you don't always achieve your objectives. So I don't know what the process is now, if you take a short break or open it up immediately for discussion, but why don't I stop going on?
As you wish. It was excellent. Thank you so much. Actually, it was very enlightening for us for restorative justice. I think it's important to have restorative justice in our work. And I think it's very convenient because we work in the reconciliation process in the middle of conflict. And it is really very interesting to understand how it works in the faculty of law. Because so many people ask me, where is reconciliation, where it stands as a science? And still we discover that reconciliation is in all kinds of sciences, not just, and it's very interesting for me to be a part of the law faculty, actually, because we have a lot of lawyers who work on restorative justice and reconciliation, also students who wants to work on restorative justice for reconciliation. So I think we can take a 5-minute break for people who want to really relax, and then we can go back and or have something to drink, and then we come back for questions and answers. Is that okay?
That is perfect. And I'm just right now paging through the comments that people posted in chat, and they're really excellent. So I'd like to talk about some of the things that people have raised. Yes.
Okay, so now it's 3:05. We come back at 3:10. 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Okay. That's perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you. It's excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I just want to I need to record it. So I'm just starting the recording. I just wanted to say that. And there's a comment that the result in the context is that there is no truth, but the false narrative. Is that part of, what do you think about that? It triggers my thoughts. Is that there's a philosopher who said truth is at the gateway of Eden. So it's like when you die, you know the truth, and you go to heaven, and then you say the gates of Eden, then there is heaven. So this is
I think you need a greater mind than mine to try to figure that out. I do, and I am a firm believer that somewhere there is a truth, and there are true facts, and there are false facts, and things like that. But sometimes it's beyond us to really draw those distinctions and make those things. And so it's one thing. I like being a law professor because it gives us a chance to speculate, and you sit in class all day and debate things like truth and justice and all of that type of thing. To me, the most unsettling job would be to be a judge and to actually make decisions that affect people's lives, and may lock people up forever or something like that. That would be hard. I would lose a lot of sleep over that, because I'm not sure we in our fallible situation can ever really know or understand, and our minds just can't embrace the entire truth.
Interesting. We have also now Matthew. I would like to go back to Matthew, who's raising his hand to ask a question. I think Matthew, you can ask a question.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your time. You've really exposed us to a lot of part about the law, retroactive justice, and truth and untruth. However, I have a few questions and comments about retroactive justice and truth and untruth, focusing more on an amnesty that you talked about, which is part of the last paragraph in the conclusion when we're talking about truth and untruth. I want to quickly go back first to the definition you gave about retroactive justice. And there are two elements that I want us to quickly examine. And the element is seeing it as philosophy and practice, in which you clearly identify that the philosophy is the way of thinking, while the practice is the way of acting. My question in this definition is, how do we clearly, conventionally manage the gap between the philosophical thinking and the practice, the way of acting, which is the way of doing things, conventional way of doing things? For example, this is the law court. There was a case before the U.S. Senate in June 21 this year, when they were dealing with the issue of LGBTQ with Miss Kelly Robinson. You know, the philosophical thinking almost overrides the way of acting, in which how do we ascertain this is the exact truth? Because people are entitled to their opinion, to the way they see things, which needs to be respected. So at what point do we conventionally say, this is the truth? What are the elements we need to look out for to really ascertain this is the truth, and it's going that will lead clearly to a very just judgment, and which is going to bring peace between the two parties. And the last question is on the amnesty. You said people coming to actually say the truth about what they have done, giving the right confession. This is what I did at so time to this. The wrongdoer confessing to the victims of the wrong that was done. Now, what are the measures to test the truthfulness of the truth that the victim of wrongdoer is confessing? What are the elements to testify the truthfulness of that truth, which will warrant the measure of being given amnesty and making the victims lose out, feel that justice has never prevailed, even with the panel, the peace panel that has been constituted. I will leave my comment to this for now, so that also others can also have the floor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
no, you've raised some a really good questions again in terms of truth. I guess I go back to the idea that you know, there is just no a good guarantee on that in terms of practice or philosophy. You know, we kind of in many ways here kind of deal with a general public consensus of what may be possible and what may not. On the amnesty situation, again, I'm not sure exactly, and I've seen films of the process. I've read the process, how the commission actually made that determination that this person was honest, this person was not. I think it may well be end up ultimately being kind of a subjective a decision. Did this person tell all that they know, or were they withholding facts and information in that type of situation? So you know, again, I'm not sure we can ever be in a position to know all the things that went on, and or that even any individual who's participated in something can really be capable of seeing all the different aspects of what went into a particular action. So I don't know if I've answered your question or not. It's a profound one, but those would be sort of my insights into it.
Thank you, Professor. So yeah, you have any comment, Professor Liner, about the question that happened with Matthew, or anything about you know, reconciliation process in the middle of conflict, and which is best? Is it truthful? How does reconciliation get the truth? Is it
yeah, so I like very much what has been said when you said, Professor, saying that you don't want to be a judge. We have this now very much in this culture that people condemn things. Recently, also with the whole war in the Middle East, everybody declares, I condemn firmly this. But when I'm a theologian, when I read in the New Testament, Jesus attacked very much human beings, condemn others. We are not the judges of the others. We just should understand each other and love our enemies, but not walk around and condemn others and think we are good people. So I think it's a good attitude to be more in a process of learning, the truth might find at the gateway of heaven. And there we might find a situation where things that find their judgment, but not coming into a process and say, yeah, I know this person is bad and it has to do this, and this is not good, but restorative justice has much more this healing approach, healing of relationships, of bringing in also all the persons concerned, and to find ways that things can become better. And therefore, I think restorative justice goes very much with reconciliation, and especially when you have, so again, this book you published here with a colleague, it's a holistic approach. This I like also very much. It's really a holistic approach, not just an intervention.
Thank you, Professor. So maybe we go to.
I'd like to add something.
Yeah.
If there's a minute, I'd like to add something as well. And this is also, I would like to add something and then ask a question to Professor Singh. First of all, thank you for your excellent presentation. So this question is derived from listening to Rawan, to Matthew, to Jack, to Zinat, and also listening to the comments, of course, of Professor Leiner and Iyad. I'm taking a step back to the beginning of your lecture when you mentioned listening. So in reconciliation in the middle of conflict, when we're in a process, in the middle of conflict, or in general in reconciliation processes, and in restorative justice processes, what I find is a very important element that both share, because they both share this element, which I think in the framework is something that is probably being explored from what you shared, that you're doing this holistic approach, that you're actually engaging psychiatry and mental health, mental wellness and mental health. Listening. You said at the beginning that we do not listen well. And for us in peace building, in reconciliation processes, the art of listening is fundamental. It is part of that framework. And I think it's the critical intersection and very vital to not only for researchers, but for practitioners when we're actually in the processes to really return to that, the art of listening, because I feel and I think that when Matthew, Jack, Rawan, and Zinat were talking about the truth, I think that although it's such a complex subject to really try to distill, to unravel the truth, but I think that we get closer to that. Part of it is how well and how strong that part of the framework, which is the art of listening, which I speak of it as the art of listening or listening in general. But I'd like to know your comments and your perceptions from the space of restorative justice and the work that you've done and that you're doing by this holistic approach that you've now taken at the law school. Thank you very much.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I really think listening is the key here. And particularly teaching law students. I think law students come, they learn what the law is, and that's the law, and law has certain solutions, and so they're less inclined to sort of listen to other people as to sort of get a minimum of facts and then say, listen, this is the law, this is the way you behave, and this is what should be done. So I think that listening process is really key here. And again, it's been stated, this is a process. It's not something that happens. I mentioned Jean Bishop, whose sister had been murdered. That her reconciliation with the murderer did not happen overnight. It happened over 30 years. She first said, well, you know, I'm not going to hold a grudge. I'm not going to think about this day and night. I'm not going to be concerned about what happened. I'm going to forget about him and go on with my life, which she did for a long time. And then she did, you know, in her mind, forgive him. And then all of a sudden it dawned on her, well, you know, is that really enough? And so over the 30 years, and she wrote to him and has been meeting with him for over 10 years. And the process is clearly not finished. I mean, she hasn't forgiven him in the ultimate sense. I think she, you know, and I'm not sure you ever could in some of those situations, but it's a long process. The thing I like about the circle process is and what happens in a criminal trial, at least in the United States, is you have the person who committed the crime, you have the facts of the crime, and all of that type of situation, but you don't have the full background of the person. And even at sentencing, where judges have probation officers go out and do a report and everything, I participated in a circle a number of years ago. It was about a 4-day a process with a professor from Marquette University in Wisconsin. And this took place in a prison. And everybody participating in the circle practically was a convicted murderer or rapist or people who had committed the worst crimes ever. And it took them a long time to open up. But then when they started talking about their childhood, their parents, what they had gone through, and all of a sudden you saw them not as monsters anymore, but as real human beings who had confronted situations that, in my mind, I couldn't even envision growing up ever going through. And it doesn't make you excuse what they did, because you can't excuse it. And part of restorative justice is that you acknowledge the harm that you've done and acknowledge what you've done and take responsibility. But it does give, I think, participants in a circle a greater understanding. We had a situation that in one of the schools, just a small thing, but a young girl every day was arriving late, and it was driving the teachers crazy, and she was constantly being then punished for arriving late at school. We did a circle, and at first she was reluctant to say, but it turned out that they lived in a very violent neighborhood where there were a lot of shootings. She had a younger sister. Both her parents were very poor. Her mother worked, her father worked, and they left home before the children went to school. And they asked the older sister to take her younger sister to she attended a different school, to take her every day to school and make sure that she was safely in school before she herself went to school. So as a result, she was arriving every day 15, 20, a half hour late at her school. Well, nobody had ever bothered to ask her, the circumstances of why she was late. Turned out that the principal decided to start school 15 minutes later every day, and she was never late again. So I think just getting the background, listening, almost always there's some sort of a solution that can be proposed. Sometimes a simple one, such as starting school 15 minutes later, or sometimes it's not so simple. And again, it may take years to finally reach a solution. But I like what you said.
Well, thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Professor Micheal. I have a comment to say that I read your the other book in what Pope Francis I would like to share. So many people asked, I took it from a quote from your book that you wrote, that when they asked Pope Francis, how do you do restorative justice? And he said, first with dialogue. So dialogue is very important to develop restorative justice, whether you speak the truth or dialogue with your enemy. So this is one of very important aspects that even people in conflict do not understand. And then they said, what is the second one, which has really intrigued me, is kindness. So dialogue with kindness. So you can, and practice kindness. So you can do dialogue. So I say that any people in conflict, they can do negotiations, they can do dialogue, but then when they forget kindness, they start working against each other in their negotiations for the benefit of each other. So for themselves. So in my negotiation, for my enemy, I will look for my own benefit. And then my own benefit is to destruct my enemy. So the negotiation transforms, the conflict transforms into more conflict because there was no kindness within the dialogue. So this is like we'll say, okay, we did negotiations, it didn't work. We did reconciliation, it didn't work. I had some call yesterday with people from the Middle East who say there is no reconciliation. We are killing each other. We are willing to go to war. And this is like what really happens, because and they said we tried it in 95, we tried it because why? The dialogue had no kindness. So this is when I read your book, it was very interesting for me when Pope Francis said kindness. What is kindness? What is the practice of kindness when I negotiate with my enemy? So don't forget, this negotiation and dialogue is very important, but when you dialogue to defeat your enemy and distract him, that's not restorative justice, and that's not reconciliation. So both enemies forget that negotiation is not just by the self-benefit of myself, but also I need to look for the benefit of my own enemy, so he can look for my own benefit. And this is how transformed reconciliation into a process or restorative justice can happen. So this is how I wanted to add, because Laura triggered that when she asked her questions, and then I said, okay, yeah, Pope Francis said kindness, and I took it from your book. So it was really interesting for me to share these comments here.
So I will add to what I just said to say that one of the practices of kindness is generous listening. And if we could all do that and do it on a daily basis, we would start strengthening that part of the framework if we ever want to pursue reconciliation processes or restorative justice processes. Thank you. Yeah, that triggered that practice, which there are practices, and we would be very happy, I think, to see you again in the future as well, Professor Sang, to share more of what that part of the psychiatry and mental well-being is doing in order to see this as a holistic process, which people on the ground actually know it is, but to actually have it discussed in the law faculty, I think, is really a space where we're going to have new ideas of what we're missing, spaces, gaps, but also be able to have more of an exchange like we're having now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I would say that this has been really wonderful for me, because I've learned so much by talking to all of you this morning that I should probably be sending each of you a check to pay you for counseling me and giving me all these ideas. So I really appreciate this dialogue. Along with kindness, I think is the word respect also, because I think we have to respect everybody. We may not love them, we may not even like them, but to respect them as human beings. And people may have false information and wrong information and be wrong headed, but we're not going to change that just simply by hitting them over the head. We've got to do it, but with a really open a dialogue where we treat everybody with respect and, as was stated, with kindness.
Mm-hmm. So we will take those three questions. If we can take the 3 questions, each of 3 of you can ask, and very fast, and not to stay for more than 1 minute to ask the question, because then.
Or 4 if your term is now.
Even if you want to have the 4, so maybe we can take the 4 together, and then we can, because we have only 8 minutes left. So maybe that would be the only suggestion that I would suggest. So 4 of you will can try, and now we have 5. It's becoming more and more.
Let's take 3, and then
I would take 3 if we take 3 now, and if we have time, we'll open for the other 2.
Yeah.
Okay,
but short questions.
Short questions, please, so we can have more in knowledge of our professors here.
Yeah, I can go ahead. I have a very a straightforward question, which is about the restorative justice in South Africa, because it gives this idea of using amnesty in addition to restorative justice as one of the main elements in this case. My question is it okay to have restorative justice, but at the same time punish the people for what they basically did? Because amnesty in certain occasions might not work. And I can think here of the case of northern Nigeria at some point, because after what happened with Boko Haram, some of the Islamic leaders thought about providing amnesty to some of the members of Boko Haram and integrating them back into society. Then the Christian members within Nigeria, they said, no, you cannot provide amnesty to terrorists in this case, even if they basically, admit what they did, even if they basically also admit the wrongdoing. So my question is, to what extent we can be thinking of amnesty in addition to punishments, while also maintaining the restorative justice process in this case?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I taught for a year in Nigeria in Maiduguri, which was the later the headquarters of, this was back in the 1980s, long before Boko Haram. But you again raised a dilemma, and again, I think you have to have everybody on board, and it's something you've got to work through, and it may be take some time to actually achieve that question of amnesty. South Africa, apartheid is ended. It made sense, I think, to grant it then or deny it, and everything. I think Nigeria is a more difficult situation where the possibility of ongoing violence still seems to be present. So, I think it's something to work for, but people are not naturally going to be skeptical.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. So we'll take Abdulrazak.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Micheal, for the insightful lecture. Just when you read, I mean, your article, like the first paragraph, like drove me to think of some scenarios. Like, is there any scenarios? I mean, I'm talking about the American scenarios, American history, in which the people, Americans, enjoy, I mean, the freedom of speech and the democratic life. Are they consolidated, for example, in situation? Because what we see in terms of conflict is that when, I mean, sometimes Americans are against war, against conflict outside the US, but it's conducted. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that when you talked about, I mean, untruth and lie, if I understood you very well, you make it like this. The difference is the domain in which it is used. I mean, for example, both of them have the similarities. I mean, they are false, but the domain, I mean, the field which they are used is different. For example, it's not lie because it is used in politics, and I'm not stealing something. But when we think of this, there is a gap in this, because we cannot make the distinction based on the domain, but it's on the effect it has on life. And this is a refer to you to, I mean, some concepts, some philosophies that came in the field of pragmatics, which is speech act theories, in which John Austin and Searle make the distinction between the sentences, the utterances, based on the effects it has on the reality, on the thing, and then what they call it, like how to do things with words. So that's my point, and then yeah.
Thank you, Abdulrazak. Thank you. Yes, Professor, you have any comments in regards of Abdulrazak?
Yeah, no, on the question of a truth, I would agree. I think it's you've got a multifaceted situation here, so I'm not sure I really have an answer to what you said in terms of American history and everything. I think like restorative justice, America is a work in progress, and sometimes we go forward. Right now, most of us, I think, have a feeling we're progressing backwards, and time will tell how we work it out. So I don't think we've ever had a situation where we've really solved all of society's problems and lived up to the ideals that we profess to believe in. And certainly our international relations profess a lot of inconsistency, and we say one thing and do another. But the one thing that makes me optimistic about America and our democracy is I think we all recognize the flaws that we're working under and trying to make it better. And I guess that's the best we can do.
Thank you, Professor. I can take only one last one, actually, because I think Rawan wanted to ask. We'll give it to Rawan. And Rawan, yeah, maybe you can ask your question. Sorry for the others who couldn't ask, but we are out of time.
Thank you, Professor. I just wanted to add to the issue of dialogue, kindness, and for me, I'm interested in that line because I'm coming from the field of conflict management, and there is what we call conflict tree analysis. In this sense, we need to actually address the issue from the historical perspective. In addition to what you have said concerning dialogue, I think it is important to take the interest of both parties into consideration. When a dialogue seems to fail when there are no interest of both parties, when you are not taking both parties' interest into consideration. Conflict arises today because we are addressing the issues from the apex rather than...
Sorry, Mr. Olani, the word was for Ravan, and we were talking about listening, and you did not listen. You were too late now when you wanted to ask. Sorry for this, but Ravan has the right to ask a last question. We must also learn to listen to each other and to have also a kind of respect, especially when it's about women and men. So please ask your question next time and manifest your earlier, but I want now to listen to Ravan's question, and this will be the last for today.
We thank you, everyone that wants to ask for many questions, but we're out of time, and we have to respect the time and the time of the professor as well. And yes, Ravan, you can ask your last question. Please ask, and then we will end that session. Thank you. Ravan, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Iyad and Professor Leiner. So, Professor Singh, my question was, in terms of massive atrocities and acts of collective punishment that is seen as collateral damages, how can we achieve then restorative justice? Who's going to talk to whom? And how can we decide if we give pardons or amnesty or not?
Yeah, you've raised as your last question at least 2 hours of discussion and answers. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's something that I can't really answer. One thing I just like to say in conclusion, when we bring it to the international level and the big questions, can we solve the world's wars and things like that? I think restorative justice does have a role to play and should be experimented with in these areas. But we can use it just even in our own families, with our own children, with our spouses, with our parents, all of that. So we don't have to think in big terms, but if there's a dispute at home, think of restorative justice and, how maybe sitting everybody down and working out a solution and listening. I think that's the way to start. And once we get in the practice of doing that, then we can take it to bigger levels.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Before we end, we thank you all for participating in this session of restorative justice. Now, what we do here at the doctoral program, we give you a jump start. So if you need to read more about restorative justice from Professor Micheal Sang, here is his book. I think it's a very good book, Restorative Justice in Practice. And we have also the other book, what I am reading, so you know as well. It's readings in restorative justice. So it's like more in practice as well. So people who want to go more into it. Yeah, thank you, Professor. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor Micheal. Do you like to say anything before we close the session? Or,
no, this is a remarkable collection of people in this session, and if we'd had more time, I would have liked to have gone around and had each of you introduce yourselves and tell me where you're from and what your field is and everything, because I have a feeling that there's a great amount of talent working on this right now.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor. Professor Leiner, would you like to add?
Yeah, just thank you so much, Professor Sang, for being with us and giving us an introduction to restorative justice, which is a very important element of reconciliation. And we learn a lot from you and your studies. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you, everybody, being here with us. Yeah, looking forward to see also everybody again next week.
Thank you, everyone. So thank you. Laura, do you like to add
anything
before we change?
Just want to say thank you, Professor Sang, and we hope to see you again. It was
thank you, everyone.
Feel free to communicate with me by email if you have any other thoughts or questions.
Yeah, that's
Wonderful.
excellent. Yeah, they have your email. I will send it around, and I think they have it from the last session. I like all to leave you with this thought that I wrote: working in progress. So reconciliation, restorative justice is a working in progress. So it doesn't happen now; it has it in the future, and it is a work in progress all the time. You need to work for it. It's not going to happen by just saying it or not practicing it. So thank you, professors. Thank you, everyone, for attending the session of the Doctoral School of AARMENA, and we're happy to find you and to have you next in our next sessions. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Micheal. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Again, we hope we have you again as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.